Hi, and welcome back to Spirit Portal. I am Erika, and it's so great to have you back here with us. And I'm really excited about introducing my guest for this episode, who, if you've been following along, you know he's one of my favorite all-time guests. It's medium Michael Mayo. How are you, Michael?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's so good to have you here. And, we always like dive in, but in case there are new listeners, I do want to just introduce you so they know who you are and why you matter to me specifically. But so Michael is an amazing medium, a psychic medium, and he's also a mentor and really has been instrumental in my development as a medium myself. He teaches classes, he does circles, he has a school that he co-leads with Megan Elisa, and it's called the Oak Bridge Institute. And they have amazing classes and all sorts of things to really help people along in their own unique development journey of their spiritual abilities. He is also an author. He's written a book that I love. It's called Spirit Speaks, and it's really about the history of mediumship, but his experience with the history of mediumship. Is that fair to say?
I would call it a little bit more about the step-by-step approach to learning mediumship. So there is a touch
Yes.
of that. There's a touch of history of mediumship in it, but I would say it's definitely a how-to guide on how to develop one's mediumship.
Yeah, I guess that is true. I did read that part too. I really, one of my favorite parts was how you went into spiritualism. I learned a lot in that. But yes, it's an amazing book and really beneficial on the path for people developing mediumship and psychic abilities. But so, how are you doing?
I am doing really well. Just glad to be here. Glad to connect with you. I know we always have really great conversations every time we come, so I'm excited to hear what we're going to get into today.
Yeah, well, me too. I'm excited to let it flow. I'm going to start you off with one question that my dad always asked me and my friends growing up, which was extremely awkward sitting around the kitchen table after school. But for you, I don't think it will be. How is your spiritual life right now?
Oh my God, your dad used to ask you guys that?
I'm not even kidding. Yeah, my
What a cool dad. That's
he had his
amazing.
moments.
Yeah,
He's
this one. So yeah, my how's my spiritual life going? It's always in flux. It's always changing. It's always growing. It's always evolving. And I would say right now we're in a good season. I would feel like right now we're in a spring season. I would say more recently there was a winter, and I feel like I'm coming out of the winter and into the spring. I don't think that our spiritual journey is stagnant by any means, and there's definitely time periods where you feel super connected and super amazing, and just like, wow, I can do a million readings and it's fine. And then there's other times where you're like, hello, is this thing on? So I definitely would say we're in a springtime for me, which feels good. I always like it when I can learn more about my abilities, learn more about where I am in my, connection to everything. So yeah, I would say we're in a good spot.
Yeah, so like that springtime ability, that springtime aspect is about you growing and developing more in ways that you are feeling new nuance or
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm one of those people who is constantly trying to understand my own mediumship and who wants to understand what this, limitations are, what's possible. And I'm always also trying to understand how can I explain something to someone else? How can I have an experience and put it into words that can help illustrate a concept or a principle that I learn from it? And so yeah, I'm finding this sort of nuanced sort of way of working that um, may need to come into some of my development and training. So, yeah, I'm sort of exploring that. The other thing I'm exploring is my healing ability. So, I've been fortunate enough to develop a really effective healing ability that seems to be able to get rid of physical pains and issues. And I have clients who have MS who have written me and told me they've been able to get off medication and nerve pain that have gone away. And, all these different amazing experiences with regards to that. People with frozen shoulder, that's a pretty dramatic one where they started off, they could only lift their arm about that high, and then they were swinging it all around by the end of the session. And so, like, there's some pretty kind of magical, fantastic sort of things going on. Interestingly, with that is it works only on like 80% of the people that I work on. So there's a 20% people that like nothing happens. And that to me in and of itself is fascinating. It's like what's the difference?
Well,
One thing
that's kind oh, go
that,
ahead.
no,
I
please
was
go.
I was going to say, well, that's kind of like mediumship too. It's like, why do we have these amazing, powerful readings and then we have some that feel okay? But I need to go back a little bit with the healing as someone I do energy work as well. And I'm so curious about what was like your inspiration and what brought you into that. I mean, I know you've done a lot of that as well, but to this level, like, are you offering it to the public?
Yeah, so actually, yeah, so yes, I'm offering it to the public. Yes, right now I'm not charging anything for it. I'm just doing it for learning purposes, I guess. And yeah, what inspired me was I had a student who was very interested in healing, and she's like, "Do you have any recommendations?" And I'm like, "Oh, da, 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 da. I don't really know if there's someone I would necessarily point you to right now, because I'm big on, as you know, results, evidence. It should have an immediate result. I should be able to see the thing that happens." And honestly, I've only known two people who have ever had immediate physical results consistently, where like the person has a pain in their body and the pain is gone in minutes, right? So one of them I can't refer to because he's a fraudulent physical medium,
Oh God.
but his healing is real. And so I can't pick that one. And the other one was Charlie Goldsmith. Are you familiar with Charlie Goldsmith at all?
No, tell me.
He is an Australian healer, and he had a TV show in the United States, I think on TLC, called The Healer. So you can guys can still watch that show, and he's actually being and has been studied in scientific journals. He's currently being studied by the U.S. government. He's being studied by a couple of schools on the East Coast, med schools on the East Coast, for his amazing healing ability. And so my student came back to me and was like, "Hey, what do you think about Charlie Goldsmith?" And I was like, "Oh, I love Charlie Goldsmith. He's amazing." And she said, "Oh, well, I'm gonna take some of his stuff and see how we go." Well, she gets back to me again and is like, "I need you to learn this." She's like, "Because I've had some amazing success with learning this, and I need you to learn this because I know you can do it." And I was like, "Okay." So I started watching the videos. I tried it out on someone, nothing happened. And I was like, maybe not. But then my friend tried it out on me, and I was like, and she had success. My pain that it was in my shin went away. And I was like, huh, okay, so it is teachable. So then he happened to have recently moved to California. And because he's doing the studies and stuff. So he had an event in LA. So I decided to go to that and watch this demonstration of his healing. It's like a little education, little demonstration. And I went to that and something clicked, and I was like, oh, this is what's happening. This is how he's doing this. And even though he's kind of explaining his process, he's also the type that says, if I teach you anything as a rule, I've failed you as a teacher. He's like very much, you need to figure it out for yourself. And so I figured it out. And then the next day, my friend had a headache. I got her headache from like an 8 to a 1. The only reason why I didn't get to 0 was because we had class, we had to teach, and so we got interrupted. And then that night, my friend had a sciatica pain, and she was like, "It's like a 9, 10," and we got it to 0 in 5 minutes. And that
Five
was,
minutes.
yeah, less than 5 minutes. I don't remember how quickly it was, but it was super fast. And I was blown away. And then, so that next day, I decided, you know what, I'm going to go on TikTok Live and just see who wants to have me try this on them. And I ended up, I think, working on like 7 people, all of them, their pains from whatever number to 0, plus the person with the frozen shoulder. And so I was like, oh my God, it like tripped me out that, oh, wait, how can I go from I can't do this to I can do this like that? And just something clicked. And yeah, since that point, sorry, I'm so stuttery this morning. I gave the month of June to just my healing. So I only did healings the whole time, and I have a whole record of people and seeing, what their pain level was, what the issue was, what it got to. Did we have to do a follow up? How long did the healing last for? Did it stick? Did it not stick? Right? And so, because I'm very much that way, I like data, I like things that like show me what's happening. And because it's a new thing that don't really understand that much, I needed to see what this was about. So that's what I did. And I'm actually doing some demonstrations of healing coming up in September in Sacramento. So I'll be doing that. And yeah, so it's just this new thing, and having some amazing results.
Okay, I have questions about this because
Please.
I've been an acupuncturist for almost 20 years. And so healing and understanding the energetics of the body and working through the channels and it is very exciting when you get a result right away. And often people get off the table and they feel better, but other people need, weeks of working with specific things to improve it. And so I am listening to you and I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. And because when I've done energy healing in the past, it feels more like a nervous system relaxation. I actually stopped doing it because I felt like I want it to be more tangible and more powerful. And I don't just want to stand there. And I do trust that flow so deeply, but it feels like it's more of a nervous system soothing, right? So when you're doing this energy work that you're doing now, this is what my question is. Do you feel like you are a vessel of energy to move through you? Do you feel like you're an activator? Do you feel like anything? Do you step out like you would in trance mediumship? Like what's happening for you? Because that's what my mind needs to know.
Yeah, I mean, that's what my mind needed to know too. Um, so basically, it varies. And this is the fascinating thing that seems kind of like a, oh, of course, sort of thing. But it wasn't until I heard it from Charlie that I really got it. And I was like, that makes a lot of sense. Why didn't I think of that before? And it's basically this idea that depending on the issue, you may have to adjust your technique to suit the issue. And so, how I've always done my healing is it's always been more of that sort of open channel flow, let it go where it needs to go. And that is actually quite effective at times, right? But then
Mhm.
there's plenty of times where that doesn't do anything, right? You feel like it's just more nervous system calming, that sort of thing.
Yep.
Well, according to Charlie, he adjusts his technique depending on, or to wait until one works. So when I'm working on someone, I will start with what I call flow, basically, where I'm just sort of letting the energy just sort of go where it needs to go and see, do I get any results? And I check in with the person. I go, how's it feel now? Was there any shift or change? I need them to be honest with me so I know that I can shift my way of working to try to help this. After that, I may go into something else, which I call proxy solution, which is where I have an image of the problem just in my mind, and I'm sending energy to that thing and the solution of that thing. And then if that doesn't work, I move to another technique. If I have specific pains or issues, I have found that certain things work really well for that. Um, and so I will work through it. So one of the people that I worked with had long COVID symptoms of not being able to taste. And I worked with her, and we ended up doing like 8 different techniques. It was number 7 that was the one that worked, and started to bring her taste back, and she was able to have her taste back. So it's interesting because it's like you kind of have to work, and that the results teach you what it is that it's going to be, that's going to be the solution. So that's kind of a really like interesting thing that I hadn't really thought of. And then the other fascinating thing about it is that it's largely you being inspired by how to do this next piece. Like I have my systems, like the things that work really well, but I've made up some of these that also work really well. So some of it is a visualization with the flow of energy. You can't just imagine it. You have to like have this energetic component underneath it. So the idea is like build the energy, maybe like in your face or somewhere, draw it back down through you, let it sort of pool here, and then direct it essentially. And so sometimes I direct it, sometimes I don't, depends on the technique. Oftentimes I'm very involved and very active in doing something very specific. I've helped things with like neuropathy in feet and hands, and I mean, just all kinds of things. It's wild the scope of it. Someone had floaters in their eyes, and we were able to get rid of, she said, like she's like, I maybe have 1% of the floaters that I had before. And she was like really distressed by how much floaters that were in her eye. And like, this is within minutes. So it's like, it's crazy. Now there's other people, nothing. And it'll be the same problem that I've worked on other people, nothing. And so it's just this crazy, fascinating thing of
Well, I mean,
why it works and why it doesn't.
yeah, I mean, it's interesting because as you're talking, I'm like listening to you and thinking about how that relates to the energy of mediumship or how that relates to the energy of whatever is around you. Like, so it sounds like what you're doing is connecting and blending with energy, but then you are using your own energy and life force um, to access direction or intention. Does that make sense?
Yeah, here's the way I like to describe it.
Okay.
I open sort of an energetic valve, if you will, that's sort of like drawing energy to me, right? And then, so if you think of it like a hose, I'm opening the hose, right? And then it moves through me. So that's the hose part. And then at the end of the hose, you can like put your thumb on it. You can change the shape of it. You can leave it open. That's where I'm coming in. At the end of it, I'm just directing the way in which it sprays, essentially, the way
I
in
love that.
yeah, that's the way that I've understood it. That like
Yeah.
feels like makes a lot of sense because I'm just opening a valve and saying, okay, and that's a requirement. Like I need to let this thing happen because that was the missing piece that I was missing was how do I open this valve to like let this thing pass through me? And then I just adjust how it's behaving based off of intention.
And then also based off of what you're perceiving and receiving from your patient, right?
Yes, yeah. So
Because
if they're
it's
saying it's
all
not
of it.
yeah, if they're saying it's not doing anything, I change my tactic. Great. I'm glad
Yeah.
I know it does not do anything. But if I even get slight movement in the reduction, I know that whatever I just did works. And sometimes that thing will take us all the way to zero. Other times I have to adjust or try other things to sort of get it to zero. But it's fascinating. I mean, it's literally fascinating. I mean, what's even crazier is like while I'm doing it, I'll do something in my mind. Like let's say someone has like tension somewhere or like a spasm or pain or something. And I'll do one of the techniques. And the moment that I like execute the technique, they go, oh, something just released. Like, I mean, constantly it's this like, I do something, they say something. I do something, they say something. And that to me is like, okay, something really real is going on here.
Well, of course. I mean,
Yeah.
and like it makes so much sense. And I feel really excited about like where you're going in your own development. And that kind of is one of the things I wanted to talk about today is how we are meant to constantly change and evolve. And that's why I started out with like asking you about your spiritual life, because it's going to be different than it was a month ago or a year ago, and however long I've known you and been talking to you. And so I just love hearing about what's happening and transforming and new ways that energy and spirit is working through you and new ways that you're like feeling your own spirit and working with others. Like it's such a beautiful thing. And this is one thing that I was thinking about because I'm starting to teach classes and I've been doing some mentoring about people with people on their own intuitive development journey. And um, it's fascinating because there's a part of you when you start doing that professionally that you're like, there's a responsibility to continue developing so that you're always bringing more to the table. And then there's also a part that's like a little bit nervous about going back to a development teacher or mentor yourself and having them help you and guide you and you feel vulnerable because, you know, you're doing this work. And so are you following what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
all makes sense because it's like we are so spiritually evolving and there's like infinite potential for us to understand all that we are on this energetic plane. And so I just love hearing like your passion and that you're bringing this whole new aspect of yourself into the world. Feels so good. And I also think it reflects like the way that the world is needing it.
Sure.
And, you know, and as an acupuncturist, like, and, you know, I have a master's degree and I've done all this work and I've been working on frozen shoulder or bursitis or neuropathy and get really good results, but not in 5 minutes. Usually. So I'm like, okay, I'm interested. I'm interested.
Yeah, I
So
mean, to be fair, there's, I would say, a large portion of them that are that short, and then there's the ones that do take longer. I mean, if you have some complex back issues with all kinds of different vertebrae and, you know, issues going on with like the spinal column and the discs and things like that, that can take a while. I'll tell you, backs can be really tricky, and you have to kind of like break them up into their little sections and then work there, work there. So that will take some time. So sometimes it can take 30 minutes, right? But the
Mhm.
fact that we get pain relief on things that people are like, nothing helps this. One of my MS people was able to get off of her medications because she
Wow.
was no longer in pain. And obviously, you know, I can't claim that that's all me. I think that's partly her too, obviously, and her choices. And not that I even told her that, that was her just deciding she wanted to try because she wasn't in pain anymore.
Mhm.
So, I mean, it's just been quite the journey, especially like something with physical pain, because people that deal with chronic pain know that any relief is better than not. Because chronic pain, I don't know how people do it. To me, like the more that I've worked with people with this kind of thing, the more respect I have for people's ability to like get through it and grit and perseverance. Because I am such a baby. I am a little princess. I can't handle pain at all. I can't handle anything like that. And people that I've seen like being able to get through life and make their life valuable and meaning. I mean, it's just something to totally respect.
Yeah, chronic pain is, unless you've experienced chronic pain, it's hard to actually understand what it's like to go through your day and constantly feel like you have something that's pulling you back from
Yeah.
experiencing joy in a moment,
Like
even.
even literally saying that, like I'm like feel teary eyed because like I like the amount of my how much my heart goes to someone that has to like go through that is crazy, and that's part of the reason why this has been so fascinating, exciting to me because like I feel like I get to do like I get to do the thing that I've always wanted to do, which is relieve the suffering of others, and I've spent my life doing that in so many different ways, and now I have this way that is just so unique and being able to support people without the use of opioids or support people without the use of other pain sort of things, and then even get some improvement or long lasting improvement. I had some people that I work on, like with the knee issue, one person worked on it once. She didn't even need the MRI that she needed to go get. And she was like, I'm totally fine now. So it's just fascinating, right? Like it's just this
Yeah.
amazing thing of, and what it really brings up for me is what does that mean about reality?
I was just going to say that. How do you feel about dimensional reality?
Yeah. Like it makes me go like, wait, so if my consciousness can have this kind of impact on someone else, what does that mean about our power and our ability with our intention, with our thoughts, and how that impacts one another? I will say this definitely as I've worked in this healing energetic field. Not that I was ever really one to like think a lot of negative things about other people, but I definitely pay even more attention to that because I recognize I knew this in like concept, but now that I can see physical results from it, now I'm really like, oh wait, no, my thoughts really do impact other people, and what I want to put out there is something that's going to be loving, that's going to be healing, that's going to be supportive. So, you know, I think that that's something else that our consciousness is powerful.
Well, I think of that as like energetic responsibility. Like the energy that I bring forward into the world is my responsibility. And so, how do I want to go about interacting with everything around me and interacting with people? And do I want to be judging people? Do I want to be in that state of thinking people can't do things or I don't. That's so beyond. But what you were just saying about consciousness and our thoughts create our reality, it's like one of the things that I think about all the time. And I think about it on a level of, you could call it manifestation, but really just a level of how do I want to be in the world?
Yeah.
And I think back to like Joe Dispenza. Have you ever done any
Yeah.
studies? Yeah.
Yeah, I know of him. Yeah.
Yeah. And he you know, he is someone that has a very loud voice. I don't know if he's the pioneer of this thought or not. It doesn't really matter, but really understanding that if you picture yourself in a healthy state, even if you're unhealthy, well, then you're attaching your reality to that healthy state. and it's easier to heal.
Mm.
And like, and it's much more complex than that in his language, of
Yeah, yeah,
course.
yeah.
But it's interesting to think like, well, what if we imagine ourselves in another state of being and our consciousness aligns with that? Like, can we shift our reality? You
Yeah.
know, because when you're doing healing work or we're doing mediumship, aren't we going between different realities and different dimensions? Like, tell me
Yeah.
what you think about that.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, especially with mediumship, I do think that we are tapping into a different realm of existence. And that's why it's a temporary connection, right? Last night I was doing a demonstration on TikTok of mediumship, and right about that 2 hour mark, it was like, it just turned right off.
Yeah.
Like it was just like, and there's no more. I'm out of the juice, right? And so I do think that that illustrates that there is this sort of in between space that we're sort of requiring, and it takes energy to be able to hold that awareness, hold that link. And so, even with the healing thing, it's interesting to think of what we're capable of, even just in this dimension, right? Like even just in this, like what are we underselling ourselves, like as people and as within our little biological vehicles, and that interplay between spirit consciousness and the physical, like that is something that I think requires a lot more study, which is why I'm happy Charlie Goldsmith is getting studied more, and medical people are taking him very seriously after all these years. And I'm so curious what they're going to discover, like the processes, the mechanisms, and all of that sort of thing. And I think that this is sort of a remembering of this rather than like discovering new things, because Tai Chi, what's that? Qigong. There's this like these medicines, energy medicines, and if I remember correctly, they would say that energy medicine is like the very first and most powerful of them all. So like you could probably know better than I do, given that you're acupuncturist, but this is what I've heard. Is that correct, Erica? Like that they talk about that?
Yeah, it really is. And that's where all the history of thousands and thousands of years of recorded, documented history of understanding the energetics of acupuncture or Tai Chi. And, but it goes back before it was documented and
Yeah,
recorded. And
yeah,
how old are we as humans on this planet, anyways? I
yeah,
mean,
for sure.
there's so much research being done about that and so many different things popping up literally around the world showing us that we're far older as humans
Sure.
than science ever thought.
Yeah,
And but I think about like the basis of how, when I'm with the client or when I'm with the student and they're asking, well, how do you do this, or what's happening for you? And it's always the most basic answer is, well, we're all energetic beings.
yeah,
And so once you tap into your own energetic source and your own energetic self and frequency of like what that is, well, then you can honestly, like you can go back and forth and feel that between another person or a place or anything that has started transforming energy. And so I think about that with healing too. I just think that like there are so many different ways to access it,
sure.
right? And
Yeah.
just like there are so many religions to find a pathway to God or to source, there are so many different access points of being a healer or different access points of, doing mediumship, which really is accessing energy in a different way. And so,
Absolutely.
anyways, yeah, I just find it fascinating. And I think that what you said earlier about it's a remembering, it's almost like we developed so quickly as humans and technology. And I mean, we've come so far in what, 200 years, and we've
Yeah,
been on this planet for thousands or millions. We don't really know.
yeah,
Like, I do think it's a remembering, like we had to advance ourselves technologically. And now we're remembering that we're more than that.
yeah,
We're we're more than our minds. We're
yeah,
more than our physical bodies. And once you start remembering that, well, then there's infinite potential for anything,
absolutely.
right? So one of my questions for you was going to be, what has surprised you the most? Like as you've continued down this path, and I'm curious, like, has this type of healing work surprised you, or is there more that surprised you about like where you are now and what you're experiencing and growing into?
Yeah, I think what surprised me, two things. related to the healing. One, the I could not and then I could. That was very surprising to me. Like honestly, the first like 3 or 4 days of starting to do healing, because I really dove right into it. Um, I was like, am I dreaming? Like, how is this real? Like, what do you mean I just could just not do this and then suddenly I could do this and it's very effective? How is that a thing? Because within mediumship and all these other things, like I very much respect the process of unfoldment. I'm very much a person of like the time of unfoldment. And while yes, one can have success, um, intermittently, right? Like at the beginning of when I did mediumship, I guess it's the same thing. I went from I don't know that I can do this to immediately giving like a perfect reading and message, right? But then I couldn't do it at all after that, right? So I was sort of waiting for the other shoe to drop. And like, isn't this gonna like not work now? Like, am I gonna mess this up somehow? And yet it still keeps working. So I'm like, okay, I think after a few months, I've been able to kind of like relax into it and be like, okay, this is a thing. I'm here. And so that's one part of why what I think is was surprising. And then the second aspect of it was, I know this is going to sound strange to say, but like there wasn't as much excitement or interest than I thought there was going to be over it. Because to me, this is miraculous. I'm like, holy mackerel, like we're fixing physical problems, we're helping people with pain, even if it's just pain management, right? Like, even that in and of itself is like, are you guys kidding me? Like, we can just do this ourselves. Like, we all need to be learning this. We all need to like be doing this for each other. And it was interesting to see, like, especially like lives and things like that, they would be full if I was doing mediumship or psychic or something like that. And when I was doing healing, it would like drop down to those like this core number of people. And it just seemed like it was less thrilling or entertaining.
I have
And
thoughts
yet
on
it
that.
and yet it was more profound in my opinion. Like
Yeah.
we're literally watching people like to me it's ridiculously amazing. But anyway, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that. But those are the two surprising things was like kind of how it wasn't as um people didn't find it as interesting. And I'm like, how is that science? Like, what do you mean people don't find this interesting?
I think like I think that there is this feeling that, well, one, I think that it's easy to judge healers.
Mm,
I think it's really easy to judge someone saying that I can help you. And because people feel very defensive about their bodies and feel
mm,
defensive about what they're capable of or what they're not. And I think there's a real story about healing the body that we have in our culture. And I think as someone, I've been as a nurse and as an acupuncturist, I've been in the health world for a very long time.
yeah.
And there's a lot of disempowerment that's happened
Mm,
for people for so long, and giving our power to Western medicine has been something that we've literally given our collective and individual power over to someone else, telling us that what we need to live a good life, whether that means taking 10 different drugs or, eating a certain way or taking a shot to make us skinny, all of these different things, right? And so collectively, our power has to be something that we claim back, like, oh, we can heal ourselves. Oh, we can help heal each other. Oh, there is more to us
mm,
than our physicality. And what makes up our physicality? Like all of
right.
these questions. And so, as someone who's been in that world, it's been fascinating to see when people start realizing that, for example, acupuncture, or Tai Chi, or energy healing, or meditation actually can shift the way that we feel in our body. You see people start recognizing that they can call their power back in that source as well. And so I think that that's going to take time. And so then when I hear you say like people don't show up on TikTok or something like that, I think there's this collective wound that we carry as humans, and a shadow over healing. And so people are like, oh, I think it's almost seen as flakier than
Sure.
mediumship or psychic work, because then the other aspect that I see is people love psychic readings because they love to feel what someone else sees in their energy,
Mm,
right? And
yeah.
they need that kind of confirmation or support to carry them on. And I mean, I do too. I like that for myself. Like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
you saw that? Oh, thank God. I felt
Yeah.
that. Yeah. I mean, like that's a great feeling. And so it's something that we can tangibly like both mind and spirit attached to. Like, and then for mediumship, it's so in your face when you're connecting to someone that it's like you can't deny it. And so then
Sure.
it's like all over TV and exciting. So I just think that um I think that the collective wound around our bodies is so deep that it's going to take a lot of people with a lot of passion and energy and desire to keep going, like how you are and how you're feeling this, and like to be a part of the change of like reclaiming this as our right and our God-given abilities to use our energy for the healing of ourselves and others.
Absolutely. I mean, I love how you put that. And I think that that's, you know, I've, when you think about mediumship, you think about psychic. When you think about mediumship just as a big topic, right? We consider healing a form of mediumship because you're passing energy through you and doing all that. And so I have explored physical mediumship, mental mediumship, trance, psychism. I've done all these things, and I always knew healing was sort of hanging out there as something that I had never really dove into, never really, but I was there and I was like, okay, I know one day, I mean, in 18 and a half years, I was like, one day I will really seriously dive into it. Because I did do some trance healing, which I really enjoyed, but it's in the functions of trance, right? But I was like, one day I'll get to healing. That'll be one of the things. And to me, it's like opening a whole new chapter of like that passion, that excitement of like, let's explore and see how far we can go, what can come from this. And while I know there's plenty of other people who have, done this for ages and ages, and God bless those people, I am excited to see what's the potential, as I would with any topic of the unseen sort of things, to see how can I understand this, explore this, and then elevate or raise this to a place of where other people can also grasp it too. That's always my thing, is like, I need to understand this so I can show other people how to do things. Because to me, if we all are supporting each other, if we all are doing these things, it's like get everybody on the bandwagon of healing, supporting each other, and discovering more of what our nature is. But one of the fascinating things that I do want to mention is kind of how it came to be. One of my dear, closest people to me passed away a year ago, like this month. And it was probably like maybe 2 or 3 weeks right before I kind of had this whole healing thing click, right? Um, and she came through one of my students who's a professional working medium. And she came through really clearly, really well. And she herself was a healer when she was here. That's a large part of the work that she did. And the message was to me, and I hadn't told anyone any of this, you're really looking into healing right now. You're very curious about this. She said, dive in head first. She's like, that's it. And I was literally like, okay, cool. I love that. That's nice validation. But I had not had that click of where I understood it yet. I hadn't gone to see Charlie and had that click. And then that click happened. So it was sort of this like prophesized thing that I think also was kind of magical about it. It's like my spirit world, my spirit helpers, my spirit people were saying, hey, this is a new avenue for you. This is something that is coming out of your mediumistic understanding, your spiritual understanding, and it's a part of this path that we really want you to go on. And one last thing, and then I'll shut up. But the one of the other fascinating things, as I'm sort of piecing all of this together, in my very first spiritual assessment with one of my teachers, Eileen, she once told me that I would be doing healing for someone, and that would be the thing that helps me kind of reach some of the other goals that I have. And she's like, it won't come through your mediumship, it'll come through healing. And at that point, I was like, what do you mean healing? I'm a medium, man. Like, you know so it's just kind of funny how I knew, and it was actually like maybe a year or 6 months, probably a year before that, that I suddenly had this feeling of you need to explore healing. Like it was all kind of bubbling up. And I'm the type of person who follows those little oomphs, as I call them, those little oomph that you feel inside. It's not loud, it's small, but it's like a pull or an itch you need to scratch. And so that's why as I look at all this, I see it as the next sort of wing or chapter or something of medium like Mayo, like the psychic medium healer, like all those other things. And I'm so excited to get it to the level where I feel like I can actually show the people how to do this and see where it goes. So
Yeah, and so you're doing it for free now,
mhm.
and you're probably going to keep doing it that way. Like, how long will you be the teacher before you feel embodied enough? Or how long will you be the student before you feel embodied enough to teach? Like, it's different for everybody and everything. And
So hard. That's so hard. I don't know. I don't think I can give a time frame at this point because um I think I'll experiment a little bit with trying to teach it to other people first and play with that and then see what happens.
Mhm.
Um, I'm the kind of person who needs to really get something before I'll teach it. Like with mediumship, I didn't start teaching for 10 years in
Yeah.
my development. Not that I think it's going to take me that long, but I do think that I'm going to really want to try to do something that I can point to and have enough experience to also draw on because information is one thing, experience mixed with knowledge is over time is wisdom. And I want to be really familiar with this before I go, okay, guys, here's all the things that you can expect. So I don't know. That's a
Yeah,
good question.
I think that and that's where it's different for everybody because I feel like nobody should teach anything, in my opinion, until it's easy, until it's so embodied and that you have enough wisdom to know that you don't know it all.
Yeah,
Right?
for sure.
Like that's so important. And
Yeah. Well, that's
but
the
that
same way that Charlie was talking about it, right? He's like, if I teach you any rule, I've failed you as a teacher. That's literally his mentality because he's like, well, who am I to say that it's going to work like this for me and therefore it should work like that for you? And he, because he started when he was what 18, 19 or something, quite young, and people would come to him and be like, you have to do it this way, you have to do this thing. And they tried to put all these rules on him, and yet his healing was working 10 times better than these other people that were trying to tell him what to do. So I do think that that's what I think also is tricky about this topic is like, yes, there's no rules in mediumship, but there's at least things that are pretty consistent, right? That we can kind of point to and be like, here's at least foundation. You don't have to do it this way, but at least these foundational ideas. So yeah, that's what I want to understand. What are these foundational ideas with this energy work? And so that I can teach it.
I love it. I love that you're in this place right now of that. I just know that feeling, that exciting feeling of like, what's possible? What am I going to tap into next? And I think that if no one has said this to you yet, I'll just say it to you, that it's really good to see you enjoying like what you are capable of. Like it's, it's a beautiful process to acknowledge that it's like this universal energy and that we all have energy and that we're all a part of this web and we're all a part of source and we're a drop in the ocean and all of this. And also here we are as human beings living these lives and we came here for a reason. And it's also to manifest our potential
Mm,
individually. And sometimes I think that gets like washed out a little bit and it's okay to experience that and to feel it and to know that there's something there that matters and that's valuable for the collective. So I
absolutely.
I hope someone said that to you, but just in case, like sometimes it's like I shouldn't take joy or pride in like what I've worked towards for years and decades, and really we should. We can own it and feel worthy to experience it in that way.
I mean, I think thank you for saying that, number one. I do feel like when this showed up, it relit a fire within me of for the work that I do. Because sometimes when your spiritual work is your work, right? It can feel like work sometimes. And that's, I'll say this word, it's painful. Like that sometimes that's painful to have this thing that is so precious and important to you. And that's your journey to God, your spiritual unfoldment, your desire to understand this bigger picture. When sometimes it feels like all of your energy is going for that journey for others rather than for yourself,
Yeah.
That's kind of painful. Like I like anytime I think about that, it like hurts me a little bit because I feel this sense of this is something so magical and special to me. I don't want it to feel like it's not that anymore, right? You feel like you lose something that's so precious to you. And when I kind of found this healing thing, it sort of relit that enthusiasm within me of like, yes, there's still so much more for me to explore and discover. And that's sort of my underlying motivation in like all my spiritual work. It was always to discover something true, to explore something meaningful and valuable to me. And what's my connection to something bigger? And this just opened a whole new facet of like, here's your connection to something bigger. And now go explore and discover it. So yeah, it is something exciting. It is something that I'm like, oh my God, yay. And I can feel that like passion and movement with that.
Yeah. And, you know, it's infinite potential. Like, that's how I feel about God and Great Spirit, whatever we all want to call it. It's like this infinite well of energy and love. And so sometimes we just, like you said, follow that hunch, and all of a sudden there's like this waterfall waiting for you to
Yeah.
explore. And like it's nice to remember that, you know, our identities and like our identification that we find for ourselves isn't necessarily as limited as we think it is, right? And
Absolutely.
yeah, when you were talking about doing the healing, the first thing that came in my mind was like, oh, they're ready to inspire him to like keep growing and to keep offering to the world. But also like our soul's path is to become closer to God through all of the work we do, is my firm
Mm,
belief. And
yeah.
I don't think you can successfully stay in the realm of doing spiritual work unless your spiritual heart is so intertwined in your relationship with God and growing as much. And like, I
Mm,
think that's why I've always been drawn to you as a personal mentor when I've needed it, is because I felt that from you. Like, your spiritual center is so intricately connected to the Great Spirit that
mm,
that comes out in the integrity of how you teach and how you relate to people. And so I just don't think you can do it long term unless you're constantly being fed in that relationship, and um, you know, having reciprocity in that relationship, and the reciprocity in the relationship of what we offer. Does that make sense?
oh yeah. And
Yeah.
what you're inspiring with me with that is one of the biggest things. If you make, your mediumship or your spiritual stuff just about serving others, which is noble and good, you always have to remember that there's something that needs to be feeding you within it. And yes, I can live off of the knowing I'm helping other people. And what I have found over the years is that I really need to have my own thing that is my own thing connected, this sort of vertical relationship, if that makes sense, where I am having this connection to that bigger thing. That's the recharge. That's the thing that fuels me. That's the thing that moves me forward. This is like my work is a byproduct of my own personal connection to that great source.
100%, 100%. You cannot continue to do the work unless your own connection to source is true. And otherwise, you're just going to be riding off fumes, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. It gets tiring. You get burnt out, you get tired, you go, why am I doing this again? Like, what's the point of this? Like, I
Yeah.
feel like I'm there for other people's to use and not something that's filling me necessarily. Because ultimately, I do feel like having a strong foundation in your own connection for you, which is why I've like had this in my mind of creating a course that's just about that, is just developing how do I deepen and develop this connection with basically using my mediumship for me, right? Using my medium
Yeah.
for myself, because I think that's something that often can get lost as people are like, I want to be a medium. I want to be on TikTok. I want to have my own, YouTube. Like people get lost in the what mediumship can get them. And they get very much about the skill and the practice. And then they're missing this whole important piece, which is what does it do for you? What is it? And how do you use that awareness or that skill or that connection? How do we deepen that awareness for ourselves? And I think that's so, so important. And what you've said like three times is the longevity of your ability to do this work hinges on that connection, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. We're on the same page on that. And it's like the most beautiful connection.
Yeah.
It's like the connection is the going home. It's the
Oh,
connection
love that.
of finding the most beautiful truth, and you're like, "Oh, that's just inside of me, and I can just tap into
Yeah.
that space and feel so much beauty and bliss, and then I can bring that out into the world." Like that is like the most beautiful aspect of um finding yourself and finding yourself in God. And
Yeah.
um, yeah, and I know we've talked about this on other episodes where, we've talked about everything, and I always just like to say that as much as possible because of what you just said. Um there's so much Hollywood around mediumship because
Mm.
it is so profound. I mean, it is a big deal to be able to
Miracle.
talk to people who have died physically and are in another realm, and yet right here, and then we get to explain that to people, and like it's
Yeah.
amazing.
It
And
is.
yeah, so I get the hoopla around it. And also it's like still the byproduct of something miraculous happening inside of us, of remembering and a connection. And it's funny, I was like, this is a little bit in merging into where I wanted to go next, but I'm just going to ask you the question. How weird are you sometimes in public around where you are spiritually? Okay, and I'll explain it because that just
Okay, cool.
sounds so weird. It just sounded so wrong. Okay, my husband and I were laughing because I came back from a walk the other day and I was like, "Oh, I was just talking to the trees and like I talked to the blades of grass." And he's like, "People have windows." And I was like, "In their houses?" He's like, "Yeah." He's like, "Don't you think people see you like walking around like our little cul-de-sac?" And I was like, "Yeah, I guess I never thought about that. I'm just like in it." And I was like, "Oh, it's so funny how this development process has taken me to find like the energy and like the source and the spirit of everything." And like now I'm like talking to them all the time. I have my favorite trees that I talk to. And so I'm curious, like, do you have anything like that? Do you
I think that earlier in my development, that probably was the case. Because, yeah, I think earlier in my development, I think I've become very incognito as I've
yeah,
gotten
I try
along
to
in my
be.
journey. You know what I mean? I think I'm a little bit more, um, I don't know. I think at this point in my journey, it sort of feels like that's a thing that I connect with when I need to connect with it. And if I'm going to have that sort of like deeper connection to all that is, I tend to be only really comfortable experiencing that by myself. Like if other people are around, it makes me feel uncomfortable because it's such an intimate part of me and like I want that to be for myself. So like there's definitely times where I've had that, and especially recently actually, like I was in Wyoming and I was riding in like untouched land in Wyoming. And although there were people around me, I don't know if you ever ride horses, but like
I
it's
do.
this very special thing to me. Like it's this very connective, earthy, spiritual experience riding horses. And when you put yourself in like out in the freaking wilderness, like miles and miles away from civilization, and you see the vastness of life and the vastness and beauty of all things, definitely that's, I mean, everybody's like having fun and riding around, and I'm over here like tearing up because it's just so, it's like living, it's like being connected to all of life. And that was that moment where I was just feeling this sense of how is this real? Like could be our lives all the time. We could be in this and like connected to all things in this really beautiful, like life-giving way. So I would say it's more in like those moments where I can feel those sort of things, but I tend to be a little bit more protective of my sort of space, I guess.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
sacred to me. You know,
it is so
I don't want anyone
sacred.
to shit on it. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
guys keep your opinions over there. I'm gonna just be with me, you know?
Yeah. It is so sacred. And I guess I just feel that all the time.
Yeah, you're
Like
lucky. I love
I
that for
just
you.
feel it all the time. I feel like the sacredness and like I'm like, "Oh my God, I just love." But yeah, I mean, I don't think I look crazy or anything. It's just so important to me when I feel like the energy of something to like acknowledge it. It feels like honoring the spirit.
What a beautiful way to go through life. Like always like finding moments in your everyday life where you get to remember you where you don't forget
Where I
your
don't forget.
your connection and the sacredness and the connection to life. I think that's beautiful.
Well, thank you. I think so too. It's really made me feel um, the interweaving that connects us all.
Yeah,
And it's also made me feel like that all life forms are equally important.
yeah.
Like, and that, and this might sound weird to some people. I doubt it will sound weird to you, but that we might be human in this life and we might come back as a blade of grass or a rock and experience like the energy of like the earth in a completely different way, and like knowing that we're part of something but in such a different form. And so sometimes when I'm like I really I use hikes and enveloping myself in nature to really to share reciprocity with like Mother Earth and with the spirit life around me. Like that's I make it an offering as much as like I'm receiving something. Um and I just think about it all the time because I
Yeah,
feel it all the time. And I'm like, oh, this is like a part of my journey that's important and sacred. Um, but it's hard to explain. It's hard to explain it to
sure.
somebody without sounding weird. But
What you reminded me of is that movie, I'm gonna get the name wrong, but Everything All at Once or something like that.
Oh, yeah, I've never seen that movie, and
Oh, worth watching for sure.
oh, yeah,
There's
okay.
like definitely these scenes where there's sort of this like alternate universe moments where like they are existing as rocks, they're existing as different animals, these different things.
Oh,
And so when you were talking about that, it's like flashing that in my mind of like, yeah, our consciousness could exist in all these different forms and all these different ways. And so anyway, it was reminding me of that as you were saying that.
yeah, well, I think about it all the time because like then I'm like, well, when you connect in to like a beautiful mountain or like the birds flying above you or even as mediums like these are portals into different dimensions. These are the ways that we connect into all the realms. Like there's not really a doorway that we walk in and then our whole physical body is going to like jump dimensions, right? It's all through our spirit. And so I think like for me, it's kind of one of the ways that I'm able to access understanding spirit in different forms and um, in different faces, really, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think connecting in with just, I think people forget that we are an expression of nature. Nature isn't something separate from
Yes.
us. We are that. Like we are, if all of life was a wave, you know, stemming from the first movement of something in the universe, right? Like we are just the universe experiencing itself. We're consciousness, we're life, we're experiencing itself. And I think we forget because we're so like technological or we've moved away from that, that we have this sense of like we're somehow, that is something we manage or we control and it's like this othered thing. But I'm like, y'all, newsflash, we are an expression of that too. So
We
when you get
are.
the chance to like what you're describing, going into nature and just like being there, being grateful, like you're literally connecting with you, like your first mover, you know what I mean?
I totally know what you mean. I mean, we are made up of the exact same ingredients as the stars in just
Mhm.
different combination of amounts. Same with the soil. I mean, and that's the thing. We are not separate from nature. We are just another expression as a rock or a tree or a cat, and we
Exactly.
just have a different soul. And yeah, I love that. And I know you have to go. It's kind of that time. So I think that's a beautiful place to wrap up our conversation. And I just can't wait to hear more about your development as a healer and like then how you are going to bring that to students and sign me up. I'm in.
Yeah,
So
sure.
yeah,
I mean,
I'll,
anyone who's interested, they can always just email me at mediummichaelmayo@gmail.com. And let me know that you're interested in setting up a time to do some healing work. And then when I'm ready to teach it, and I mean, we're friends. We can we can just chat about this, but
We'll
well,
talk.
as a separate thing. But yeah, no, I mean, I just want to say, Erica, I always love our talks. Like, I think you really have something within you that seeks truth and authenticity and just true connection to divinity that I love. I genuinely love it. So please have me back on your show. I love our conversations. It's like my favorite. So yeah,
Oh,
just want to give that to you.
thank you. And that's where we're kindred. I feel it
Yeah,
back.
for
And
sure.
that just made my day. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Everybody, please check out this beautiful soul, medium Michael Mayo, healer Michael Mayo, and and you will definitely be back. I'll have you on as my resident. I don't know what that's called. Resident something.
Resident person guest.
Resident person person we love. So, everybody, thank you for listening to this episode of Spirit Portal, and stay tuned for more, and take good care of yourselves.